Good evening. Happy almost Halloween, everyone. Based on my upload schedule, this video will be the last one you see before Halloween, so... But I'm not gonna sit here and tell you horror stories or talk about scary music. I'm gonna talk about the scariest thing of all time. Being forgotten. That was a little deep, wasn't it? Agoraphobia is an intense or irrational fear of being forgotten or forgetting someone or something. And it's a fear a lot of us have, whether subconsciously or consciously. A lot of people's biggest fear is just leaving this earth and being quote-unquote insignificant or not doing something that people will remember you for. Now you may be asking yourself, Henry, what does this have to do with music? Stop scaring me. It actually has a lot to do with music and the topic we're about to talk about today. In this video, I want to talk about a project that a certain musician made a year or two ago that seemingly no one has talked about since it released. Now, it wasn't because the musician wasn't popular or anything, it was just that the album was so different from what people expected, and they didn't like that it was virtually untalked about. And the album I want to talk about today is 5 Easy Hot Dogs by Mac Demarco. Now, if you're not a huge Mac Demarco fan, you only know him from his hit songs or something like that, you may not even know this album exists. And I wouldn't blame you, it didn't get very much coverage. Critics and music journalists gave it kind of underwhelming reviews, and it just overall was not a very successful album. But I think that's baloney. I think people misunderstood the entire album, and this is me defending it. But anyways, I think that's enough of an intro. My name is Henry, I love music, and this is where I talk about it. If you look directly below my video and you see that you are not subscribed, what are you doing? If you're seeing me for the first time and you don't really know who I am, please consider subscribing. I'm not gonna get on my knees and beg, that's kinda corny, but it would be really cool. It helps small channels grow a lot, and it'll help other people just like you get recommended this video, because they might like it, or they might hate on it. I don't judge. Take advantage of me being small enough to still read all of your comments and let me know what kind of video ideas you want to see from me. And yeah. Alright, enough e-begging. Thank you for watching. Let's get on with the video. So Mac Demarco is nowhere near shy from the spotlight. I'm not gonna give you an entire background on the dude. You could just Google him and find an entire Wikipedia article detailing his entire life. But what I am going to talk about is the lead up to the release of 5 Easy Hot Dogs. So I don't have the exact date that the album was announced, but according to this Pitchfork article written on January 4th of 2023, it stated that Mac had announced the album 5 Easy Hot Dogs and that it was going to release on January 20th. Now, as I'm sure you'd be able to tell, this excited all kinds of Mac fans, whether you had just started listening or you've been listening all the way back. His last full-length LP, Here Comes the Cowboy, released in 2019, which was 4 years prior, and he hadn't released any new material since the Here Comes the Cowboy demos, which had come out in 2020. So that was still a 3-year gap in projects, even with the deluxes. So obviously, this excited his fans. Not like that. Or maybe like that. Mac Demarco fans are some interesting people. Love you guys, but you know who you are. The same article details that Mac was on a road trip from Los Angeles to a cabin in Utah, where he recorded tracks along the way to come together as this full-length LP. About the cabin in Utah, Mac stated, "It probably could have slept about 20 people, but instead it was just me withdrawing from nicotine with a bunch of taxidermy animals all over the place. No other humans for probably 50 miles in any direction. Horrible idea. I lasted one night and went back to Los Angeles the next day. When I first got back home, I felt as though I had given up my idea and failed to finish what I was trying to do. The nature of ripping around and recording and traveling in this manner doesn't lend well to sitting around and planning or thinking about what it was that I was setting out to do. I didn't ever have a sound in mind or a theme or anything. I would just start recording. Luckily, the collection of recordings from this period all shake hands. They have a present musical identity as a whole. I was in it while I was in it, and this was what came out of it. Just the way it was. This record sounds like what rolling around like that feels like. I hope you enjoy." So not a ton of information to go off based on what we're going to expect from this album. All we know is that it's gonna sound like Mac Demarco. It's gonna sound like him. So it gave a lot of room for fans to think, theorize. But what we got on January 20th was nothing like what people had thought it was gonna be. 5 Easy Hot Dogs released, and to everybody's surprise, it was a fully instrumental album. There were no lyrics on the entire album except for the very first song, which is just him like counting down the song. The album is 14 tracks long, and each track is named after the city it was recorded in. And if there are multiple tracks recorded in the same city, there's just a 2 or a 3 after. Now, the fact that this was an instrumental album turned a lot of people off initially, which was very surprising to me. This led to the hype for the album being tremendously low after release, and it getting, I think Fantano gave it like a 4. I think Pitchfork gave it like a 6. Which is alright. But it was like the least talked about Mac project I could think of. It's very interesting to see people's reaction on like Reddit and Twitter, because there was about like a 60-40 split of people being upset that he didn't say like more than 5 words on the album, and people like resonating with it on like a spiritual level. It was really funny to see. But I always found the hate on the album interesting, because the album sounds pretty much exactly like he said it would. The album sounds like a road trip, plain and simple. It's laid back, there's not a lot going on, it's super catchy. The riffs and the instruments that Mac uses are very telling of his style, and it overall is just a glimpse into his mind at the time. But even with how good I thought the album was and how good some people thought the album was online, it unfortunately didn't do much. It was virtually untalked about after its release, and I don't think I've seen a single video on the album since like 2023. I could be wrong, but... Now, why do I think people misunderstand the album? It was very obvious that people went into this album with a very fixed mindset of, I know what I want a new Mac DeMarco album to sound like, and that's not what it sounds like, so I don't like it. I'm not gonna call these people bandwagons, even if they might be. I'm not gonna say they're fake fans. It's just not what they expected, and it was too different to their own taste to stick with it. Which, I mean, it happens, it really does. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. But once you kind of expand your brain, as corny as that sounds, and just kind of look at all the attributes that led into making this album. A drive all the way across the country to a cabin in the middle of nowhere, where Mac was not only just trying to separate himself with society, but quit an addiction. And I don't know how many people know this, but Mac's father also sadly passed away. I believe, I want to say a year before this album released. Maybe 2, there's not like an exact date, but I know that he passed at some point shortly before this album released. So all of these big themes at play, travel, grief, addiction, separation, there's just all of these big attributes that are being pulled into this work of music. And I think every track in that album embodies one of those to a certain extent. If you've never listened to the album before, I highly recommend it if you couldn't tell already. But if you have listened to it before, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean. There's tracks like the opening one, Gualala, which in my opinion resembles the travel aspect a lot. It feels like a song you'd listen to while going on the freeway. Or it feels like that to me. Your interpretation of it may be different. There's tracks like Victoria, which has this kind of xylophone or like marimba background to it, which feels a lot like an exploration type of song. But there's also songs with a more somber theme to it, like Portland. Each one of these tracks just has so much emotion and so many feelings packed into it that can be interpreted in so many different ways, which is one of the beautiful things about instrumental projects or instrumental albums in general, is just that it opens this huge door of interpretation. No one on the song is telling you specifically what the song is about, so there's an infinite amount of ways that you can take it. And that is the reason I think this album is so beautiful, and why it was so sad to see that people just kind of dropped it as soon as it came out. But I also quickly want to talk about my experience with the album, because for some weird reason, this album has had like a grip on my person since it released. So when this album came out, I was just a wee lad, and I had just gotten off work. And I remember at the time being really close with the people I worked with, so after our shift, we worked in this small shop. We hung out after the store had closed to just talk, catch up with each other, with no customers around. And in the middle of our conversation, one of my friends mentioned that Mac DeMarco was supposed to release an album. So we checked Spotify, and lo and behold, 5 Easy Hot Dogs is sitting on our screens. We played it over the loudspeakers at work just to kind of see what we were working with, and my coworkers didn't really like it very much. For the same reasons I stated earlier, it just wasn't what they were expecting, and I understood that. I couldn't really process what I was hearing just because it was over these big speakers in our store, and and I didn't really like care that much at the time, but I liked what I heard initially. And then that night I went home, I put my headphones on, and I listened to the entire album, and it's so good. It really is so good. I've been a big fan of jazz my entire life. It's one of my favorite, if not my all-time favorite style of music. So I guess I'm used to listening to instrumental music, but the album was just so good to me. You could obviously hear Mac's quirk and his style in every single one of these songs. And it was so perfect. It was beautiful to me. That was my last semester of senior year in high school, and I think I listened to that album, no lie, every single day. I got the CD for it, which is across my room, and I'm not gonna grab it right now because I don't want to. But because I listened to it so much, it ingrained itself so hard into that portion of my life that like anytime I listen to it now, I just have to like sit down and think. I have so many memories tied back to that album, and each song represents a different one. I was taking guitar lessons at the time, and I remember running up to my guitar teacher with the intro song Gualala and being like, I don't know how to play this song, and I don't know if you do either, but we need to work on this. And we spent the next like month learning Gualala from 5 Easy Hot Dogs. And it was great. I learned how to play it. I don't remember anymore, but I learned at the time. And I remember him texting me like a few days later and just being like, I listened to that whole album and this is like insane. It was just such a raw and emotional project that because it was so open to interpretation, I was able to input my own experiences, stories, and memories into the album, and that's why it's become such a big part of my life. I still listen to the album very often. I think I was listening to it like in the background a few days ago, and it might be my favorite Mac Demarco album. If you get mad, I'm sorry, but it's really good. Since then, Mac has dropped like a 200-track album with mostly instrumentals, so maybe it was just foreshadowing for it. But I will always be thankful for that album, and I will always cherish it so much, even if it's not his most liked album. And not only was this video made just in defense of this album, but it was also made just as a piece to make sure that this album is never truly forgotten. Not that I ever think it will be, but I don't know. Truly beautiful album. Mac is truly a beautiful person, and if you haven't listened to it, you need to. Alright, that's gonna about do it for today. Sorry if this video was kind of just like a really big yap session. I mean, I guess all my videos are. But the main project I'm working on right now is a chromacopia video, and I'm waiting until the actual album releases until I film that. So I've been documenting the rollout and everything, and I'm waiting for the actual music to release, and you guys will get that next week. So please subscribe, stay tuned to that. And also, my Small Artist Reaction 2 is out on the channel right now. I posted it last week. There's a ton of really good artists in there that I want you guys to check out. They're all super beautiful and amazing people. If you guys are looking for some new music, go check it out, and you'll hear my thoughts on it as well. But yeah, until next week, I will see you guys later. Bye.